Oh, it's a brisk day today. This might be the first time in the year that I say I cannot feel my hands. Oof. All right, sketchbook photo to start the day. I'm taking a picture here of, I think, just the trunk of a tree surrounded by a bed of yellow leaves. Nothing big, nothing clever, but certainly a sketchbook picture to start the show.
You know, there's a bit of wallpaper hanging off the wall. Fine, just draw behind it,
yeah.
You know. I mean, it was a scruffy, chaotic house, and, you know, it was a great privilege. You know, it wasn't pristine. I had friends, you know, can't do that, can't touch this. It was mayhem, and it was wonderful.
That's Gael Hillyard describing growing up and being allowed to draw and paint and write on the walls of this studio that her family had. Sort of childhood where, darling, just make sure you pack all your paints away doesn't exist. It's more like, why have you not painted all the way across the ceiling yet? Go back in and make sure you do. Imagine having that kind of space to grow up in as a child. Ooh, it's a bit boggy underfoot. It's going to start being these wet photo walk, wintry wet photo walks. Actually, where Lynn Fraser, my travel buddy, lives in Inverness, where we take the photo walk each year, where we go on the retreat. That was snow covered when I spoke to her yesterday on Zoom. I'm about to say wonderful, but I'm sure there'll be people that say wonderful, wonderful. I heard a travel report actually earlier this morning where even the snowplow on the famous A9 that I go along each year was there'd been one that had broken down, and so that had stopped all the traffic. The thing responsible for starting the traffic had stopped the traffic. Anyway, Gael, yes, it was hard actually to find a clip to play at the start as that definitive teaser segment I play, because Gael is she wears many creative hats: artist, photographer, writer, thinker. I like that idea, by the way, a professional thinker. Where do I sign? So, she wears all these different hats, so it's a conversation that's eclectic, to say the least. And whilst our chat centres around art, I think her thoughts are as applicable to photography and to making films, to recording sound, obviously to writing. We talk about tucking yourself away for a couple of months in the middle of deep winter on the UK's most remote inhabited island. 60 people at the mercy of 80-mile-an-hour winds and rather sketchy power. Gael chose to go and live there as a resident artist mid-winter. Slightly scary, I think, for the utter remoteness, but mainly fantastic for the space it would give you to create and just think. And then we also chat about a retreat she attended where, get this, over 100 people share space in complete and utter silence for 10 days. You can't interact, you can't touch, you can't even say, pass the salt, would you, at dinner time. Again, I think it's fascinating for the remoteness, but this time of a different style altogether. We talk about artist workshops. We talk about AI in art. We talk about making photographs to be a part of your art. We talk about writing, about the magic of fountain pens. Even chocolate box art, but not the kind you're probably thinking of. We talk about a whole host of things, actually. I think you've got the idea now, and I have to say, it was the kind of chat I'd really hoped to record, because it follows meeting Gael for 20-30 minutes or so a few months back during the Scottish Photo Walk retreat on the darkroom day in this wonderful old Victorian school that's been converted into artists' spaces and studios. I'd seen her work on the walls of the exhibition space in what was the old school hall, and I just knew that Gael's ideas her enthusiasm, her unconventional thinking will make a great conversation with this show and sit wonderfully alongside the fantastic letters that you've sent in.
Today on the Photo Walk.
I think as human beings, we change every minute. We're constantly changing. We're constantly experiencing new things. You only have to look at people like Picasso, even Van Gogh. A lot of people have very interesting stories, and they need somebody just to give them the confidence to draw that out of them. One thing I can't stand is sort of corporate speak. I think it's horrible. Corporations are made of human beings, not machines. And it was wild. It was 80-mile-an-hour winds. The electricity generator, one of them broke halfway through. I'm not a Buddhist, but it is actually part of a Buddhist practice where you are basically internalized completely. AI has been there for over 70 years. It's like Google, it is not going to go away. We just need to sort of be aware of it and use it responsibly.
That's Gael Hillyard, my guest on the Photo Walk show today. And alongside Gael, I'll be sharing some of your letters, your stories, and the thoughts you've sent in about life and your adventures with a camera as we walk together. It's a show shaped by you as much as my wonderful guests, which is what makes this time together each week feel so personal. I'll peek into that mailbag in a moment just to see what's coming up for you. But before that, thank you to our Patreon members of our community, our extra milers, as you are known because your belief in this show, your desire to keep us walking together week after week is the only way that we stay on that path. It truly is. Every week, there's an extra show available through Patreon, which now features a second part of my conversation with my guest, chats with those in the community, and the Friday Reflection, my own take on making pictures and a life behind the lens. Actually, it includes the Monday through Friday Reflections. Thank you also to my sponsor, arthelper.ai. They help you to sell your photos online by making for you posts, mock-ups, and marketing emails for you. I say this week after week, and I mean it. If you have ever thought, hang about, I've got some pretty good stuff, maybe I could sell my work, but you haven't a clue how to start, arthelper.ai does the tricky bit for you. That's what they're there for. And you get 30 days free with the code PHOTOWALK when you go to arthelper.ai. And there's now a full video on the show page that walks you through the process so you can, like I'm doing for the show, set up your profile and start to think about marketing your amazing photographs. Right, on the show, Spike Boydell, our man from the Canoe Down Under, has some thoughts about really slowing down. And I mean really slowing down. Comedy writer-in-chief Hegaard the Dane, aka Lars, has a letter about solitude and spending a night in jail. Lars, what have you been up to? John Kenny talks about trees and the Sycamore Gap, which has a strange local reference, well, to me anyway, this weekend. Bill Frische has written in with a whopper story. Honestly, it was this big. And I'd like to tell you a bit more about the amazing craft of photogravure that we're going to be doing on the new Scottish retreat in June. There's a reminder of this month's assignment, which is the last one of the year, I've decided, as I really want to concentrate on The One, the feature called The One in December. So, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, definitely this week, check. Walking boots, need them this time of year, check. Spare film or an extra SD card, check. Spare batteries? Oh, I seem to have a problem with that. I'll tell you about it later. Let's walk.
Without wanting to labour the point, I think this is the first week I can do that annual wintry welcome. I cannot feel my hands or my feet. And my mouth is going to make me sound drunk. Always on cold days, I just can't seem to speak in the same way. Do some facial exercises. Anybody looking at this right now is going to think, what is that man doing? But it's certainly not as cold as my Canadian friend Kelly would say. She'd say, -2, -2, it's like a heat wave. Here in Canada land, it's -23. And that's just in the shower before I go outside. To To be fair, Kels, we are now just edging on plus temps. And the sun is, sometimes out. Come on, sun. Show yourself a bit more. I just wanted to have a Britishly British moan about the weather, because that's what we Brits do best, isn't it? It's like an Olympic sport for us. Little known fact for those who don't live on these isles, we actually study how to talk about the weather at school. True. It's a whole exam course. Maths, English, science, history, geography, and how to talk incessantly about the weather. Very excited, though, to bring you Gael as my guest today, and she even makes reference to the other spelling of Gael during our conversation. We're right on message, we are. So welcome along to the walk. Your letters and your thoughts shape this show. Your reflections on walking and creativity and photography give us space to pause as we head out along our paths together. That's what the Photo Walk show is all about. And we're starting this week with a mailbag, a letter that's been maturing in the larder of letters since August. So it's now perfectly ripe and ready to read. It's from our friend in Australia land, Spike Boydell. Now, Spike wrote in about a new word I'd discovered quite a while ago, actually, partly from our other friend living in a world down under, Amanda Wood, because she'd mentioned this on the Scottish Photo Walk retreat last year, actually, but also because it's been mentioned by others too. And I wish I'd had access to this word, if you like, when Mr. N used to bark at me in the school playground for looking like I was wandering without a plan. "Oi, Jamesy," he'd bark. "Buck up your ideas." It's fair to say I was a bit of a daydreamer at school, really, in every department. Never more noticeable than the school sports field. But the word that I'm talking about here is flaneur. Flaneur. Is that like a flannel, Neil? No, it's not. I looked it up so I don't get it wrong. Quote, "A flaneur is essentially someone who wanders with intention, but without a plan. Not rushing anywhere. Not chasing a task, just moving through a place and noticing things where most people walk straight past." The word comes from 19th century Paris, where writers like Boydell used it to describe a person who strolls the city streets simply to observe life as it unfolds. You're describing pretty much here, I think, what street photography is. Mr. N probably would have called it lazy. I call it observation. It's slow, curious looking. That's what it is. You let the world come to you rather than hunting for the moment. And walkers and photographers and train riders and people watchers in cafes and those who walk along with this show, you all share, I think, a bit of this spirit. A flaneur is someone who treats wandering as a way of paying attention. And so on the back of that, we talked about being one on the show, and Spike wrote in with some thoughts. Neil, says Spike, "I loved your thoughts on flânerie. You caught the feeling of wandering with your eyes open, the sort of roaming that has roots in Baudelaire's writing and later in Walter Benjamin's work. Benjamin saw the flaneur as more than a stroller. He saw it as a way of noticing life in small, revealing fragments." And it reminded me of my years at the University of Technology, Sydney, where I worked with my colleague Andrew Benjamin, no relation to Walter. Andrew ran a conference on Benjamin back in 2006, the year of our marriage, by the by. And it was there that I first understood how the flaneur isn't someone who simply strolls, but someone who really pays attention. Attention to the world, that is, as it passes. Little impressions, half moments, details that most people skim past. There goes the, what would that be? Is that a pinstriped? Yes, it is. Pinstriped Express. On the way to Paddington. That's the part of the photo walk that really resonates strongly with me. Through your essays and your pictures, you give your listeners that same experience of calm, observant wandering. You lead people through bits of everyday life and you let those moments breathe. Goodness, you're very kind, Spike. Thank you. I shall pop you on the Christmas card list, obviously. For me, Flannery looks a little different. My wandering, says Spike, happens by canoe. Camera at the ready, out in the Australian bush. The river becomes a street, the forest, the arcades, the changing reflections on the water, my window displays. My canoe sets the rhythm, slow and willing to drift, and the camera becomes the place where I hold the fragments that catch my attention. If the old Parisian flaneur found a kind of calm in the crowd, then mine, says Spike, comes from being alone on the water. But the intention feels similar. It's a way of seeing that doesn't force anything, just lets moments present themselves. I do like this idea of you drifting in your canoe as your way of just being at one with nature. Actually, Spike has a YouTube channel, which I will link to. The idea of just moving along in the canoe, he makes these observations as he paddles. There was a song called Drifting, wasn't there? That song's coming to mind. Drifting. Don't sing, Neil. No, it was. Drifting. Was it a Muppet song? It could have been. I can't remember who it was by, but it does remind me of you in your canoe, Spike. It really does. And whenever I watch Spike's videos, I'm always thinking, because he's right out there on his own in the outback, nobody else there. I'm thinking, but what about the gators? Not the gators, they wouldn't be in Australia. What am I talking about? Well, what about the crocs? There we go. What about the crocs? But he makes these fantastic pictures. He gets really, really close to all of wildlife, including the lizards when he gets close to the bank, including the most amazing bird life. I'm deeply envious, Spike, of your flannery, and I'll put some pictures on the show page today. If you'd like to send a letter into the show, like what Spike has, then send it to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. If you're sending pictures, 2,500 pixels wide, please, if you can possibly manage. Otherwise, don't worry, send them full size, and I will do the heavy lifting. Now, just before we join Gael, I want to give a mention to our Scottish retreat. We moved from September to June next year because we're in Mongolia in September, and we thought we'd change it up a bit next year as well. It's a week away, arriving Sunday, departing the following Saturday. You stay in our Photo Walk retreat home, as I think of it, the barn on the Black Isle. Perfect for road, rail and even air links. Every day we'll be working a little more on your photography during the day and on our laptops into the evenings, sharing thoughts, sharing experiences, sharing the walks. And one of the new things we're doing this year, or next year, 2026, we're not quite there yet, instead of being in the darkroom, we're going to be doing something called photogravure instead. Now, you'll be invited to either make on our first photo walk of the week a digital picture that records the spirit of your time walking amongst the wonderful, fast-flowing, famous Black River, or the woodland that we walk through right next to it. Or, and this is important, you can bring a picture, the one that says everything about your photographic life, to produce a one-off, possibly two-off, prints using a process that's wonderfully physical. It really is. It's a very special workshop, this, where I promise everything slows down. Polymer photogravure is one of those rare processes that really pulls photography back into your hands. You expose your picture on a light sensitive plate, then you ink it, and then you wipe it, and then you run it through this, is it a 2-ton press? And what comes out isn't just a print. It's a piece of craft, really. Deep tones, real texture, something that you can really hold and feel. We talk a lot about texture on this show, and I think photogravure for me, is a classic, brilliant example of this. And that's why we need some special prints that you can really handcraft. because the chances are you'll never make another thing like it in your life. Look at all these geese. My word. Hold on. Hold that Scottish thought. So many geese here. I've never seen so many. I know they're not making much noise. Why haven't you lot gone south? Hey, don't you go south to Spain? No? Well, don't answer back now. It's too cold to be in this river. Go on, Spain, the lot of you. Where were you? Yes, it's deliberate, unhurried work, the kind that lets you settle into an image in the way that a screen never will allow. And you walk away with a print that exists nowhere else on Earth, because you made it, start to finish. And I'm very, very excited about the process. We'll break for cameras as well. Take a wander along the River Ness during that workshop. And of course, there's our Loch visits, a writing workshop which has been tweaked for 2026. And we'll be revisiting how to use sound in your creative life alongside your pictures. And, and the food. The food. Did I mention the food? No, Neil, you didn't. I'm surprised you haven't. The food is one of the highlights of the week. So, a week on retreat, workshops, breakfast, dinner, beautiful dinners, and a comfortable private room in the barn, all included. All you have to do is get yourself to Inverness. Only 3 places left now. We're not sure whether we're going to do a second week next year. We may just do the one. So go to the Photowalk website and look for Scotland 2026. Who is that hooting in the background? Shush. Right. Gael Hillyard, my guest today. We'll do this in 3 parts, actually, today. Now, I met Gael on the Scottish retreat just gone, as mentioned. She works out of the building we've been using darkroom facilities out of. Is that correct English? For a while now. I told you it's cold. You can't think when it's cold. It's a building you'll hear referenced as WASPs. Everyone loves the smell of an acronym in the morning. WASPs. This one stands for Workshop and Artists Studio Provision Scotland. And it's one of those places that genuinely keeps the creative world turning in Scotland. It's fantastic. Across the country, they give people a proper space to work without charging an arm and a leg, and that's difficult to find, I can promise you that. Anyway, I met Gael in this wonderful Victorian school that is WASPs, and we had a conversation that is about as eclectic, as I say, as anything I think I've recorded of late. Here's Gael Hillyard, part 1 of 3 parts today.
Gael, it seemed written in whatever stars one believes in that you'd navigate a path more creative, because you grew up in a large Victorian. It's atelier, isn't it? Atelier is the correct pronunciation. Yeah.
Yes.
What does that? Does that mean you lived in the place from a young age?
No, we lived next door to it.
Right.
My parents had a pretty big sort of terraced townhouse, and then the house next door was also available, so they took that on. It was an old fishmonger's, so it was freezing cold, but they used it to paint and make things and do things, and it was dusty and messy and peeling wallpaper. It was absolutely wonderful. It was rooms lined with marble and huge, great big windows.
What does atelier mean? What?
It's actually studio.
But atelier sounds so much more, I don't know, it sounds
It
more
sounds
creative,
very grand,
darling.
but
Yes.
it's really just a studio.
So they were artists and creatives themselves?
Yes, they were creatives. We're a very creative family. My mother still, until recently, painted abstracts. Nobody knew her. She just did it, and she sold a little bit of work, had fun. But I had the kind of family that had, if they didn't have canvases because they were painting so much, they would turn over a chair or a table and paint underneath that. So when I was tiny, I'd be on the floor scrabbling around and look up, and there'd be a face looking down at me of an aunt or a friend or something, which was quite scary in a way when you're sort of 4 years old.
So it wasn't moving or bolted down. You would turn it over and paint on it.
Yes, absolutely.
You sort of family that would go on holiday and collect driftwood and bring that home and paint on that as well. And
yes,
right,
constantly. Yeah. We were constantly bringing bits home from the woods, from the beach. I remember sort of collections of seashells on the wall, pinned and glued to boards, and trying to glue them back onto boards. So yes, there are always bits of antiques. It's a very eclectic mix from quite an eccentric, I suppose, family in a way.
Well, it's a perfect way to grow up, isn't it? I mean, that's the ultimate. I know creativity isn't necessarily for everyone, but I don't think there's many children in the world that wouldn't have liked to have grown up having full permission just to write and draw and paint on anything they could find.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of wallpaper hanging off the wall. Fine, just draw behind it. I mean, it was a scruffy, chaotic house, and it was a great privilege. It wasn't sort of pristine. I had friends. Can't do that. Can't touch this. Yeah. It was mayhem, and it was wonderful.
Whereabouts in the world was that, Gail?
That was on the Wirral.
So, in terms of growing up around artists that would come into this amazing place, and everybody would be so creative, was that a kind of formal education in some respects?
Yes, I've had people around me in my childhood who said, if you're going to draw, you draw properly. You don't turn things around. You don't turn paper around. You draw as it is. You don't trace. You don't use any instruments. You use your paint. You use your pencil. You use your substrate in the situation it is. You don't keep moving it. And you learn to do that way. Of course, I completely ignored all of that.
So I suppose that's a bit like a stream of consciousness in terms of the way sometimes you're encouraged to write. Lay it all out on the paper, don't stop, keep writing, keep the pen moving. You were doing that, weren't you, from a very early age?
Yes, so I probably wrote more than I drew when I was younger. And I probably still do writing more than I paint. Now I write a lot, but writing was probably my thing when I was growing up. Poetry, prose, research. I take a book like The Lord of the Rings, for example, and completely categorize it, and then file it away in little cigarette boxes. So I'd have every character, every name, every position, every place, all categorized and linked together, and then I'd have little fag packets that I'd put the bits of paper in as a sort of encyclopedia. I should have kept it. I think it got thrown out.
Well, that would be a work of art in itself. Now, it was actually. Did this transpose into your schooling then? I'm expecting you to say straight A's at everything to do with English.
I was very bright. I was very, very good at school, but I hated school.
Did you?
I really didn't. I didn't go to university because I couldn't stand the thought of being, sort of constricted by education. Yeah. So I basically forged my own way. I taught myself everything I know, which has probably left me very vulnerable to sort of things that aren't correct, but it's my way.
Yeah, but it also gives you that permission. I know that's an overused phrase, but it does give you that permission just to be able to play in a professional way for your entire life. You're not subscribing to any rules or rules of engagement. You're making it up. I mean this in the nicest way, as you go along, which is just the most wonderful way to work, isn't it?
It is, because I make my own rules.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not subscribing to rules. I make my own rules, which I'm sure my husband's horrified by. But
So I'm trying to join some dots now, because I met you in Inverness. You have 2 workspaces, which I'll come on to in a moment's time.
Yes.
But you moved with your husband from England to Scotland. What was the move about? Why did that happen? And how have you ended up in this wonderful place called Wasps?
My husband was working in the city and he was made redundant. And we actually had a trip booked to the Highlands 2 days later, just by coincidence. So he bolted straight up here, just trying to escape everything. Yeah. And then we came across this little house in this gorgeous glen, and we thought, right, that's it. And it had an annex, it had a wing. Right. And I thought, well, that would be great for an office. So we already had a business as well. We had a sort of business that we were running. So we just basically packed everything up and moved up here. And that was 28 years ago.
Was it a leap of faith, or was it always going to work?
It was a total leap of faith. Probably a mistake in some respects, leaving London. We should have kept a foothold there. That was a bit silly. But, we've had some great experiences up here. My husband actually still spends quite a lot of time in London.
Does he? Right.
He does a lot of work down there.
When you look back at those early days, you're painting surfaces and doing whatever you wanted with a brush on a wall or whatever you could find to paint, draw and write on. Is there anything from that routine that still sits in your work today?
Yes, the texture, the sort of, not being afraid to make a mess. And just sort of bringing it back to that impermanence. I'm not afraid to basically obliterate a work and then restart it, even if it's been hanging up there for 5 years and people go, oh, that's gorgeous, but, nobody's bought it yet. I'll just basically paint over the whole thing.
Wow. I think I saw a sense of just how eclectic your work is when I saw there's a sort of permanent exhibition that I saw at Wasps, which is where you're now based.
Yes.
And it's not one thing or another. It can be acrylic, it can be oil, it can be watercolour, it can even be AI. And I won't go into AI now, but we'll come on to that.
Yes.
There's a real eclectic nature to your work. I often talk about, in my photography, sketchbooking, which is a term I've adopted from another photographer, but sketchbooking with my camera. And
yes.
in many respects, it seems to me that you're always looking to experiment and perhaps sketchbook in some way.
Yes, I do. Actually, I'm just looking. I've forgotten on my desk. I've actually got a sketchbook, which I can just see. It is literally, it's in a black sort of moleskin type A4 book.
Yeah.
And it's just stuffed at the moment full of cyanotypes. It must be about 12, the pages have all fanned out. It must be about 12 inches deep of sketches, drawings, ideas, notes. And that's just one of many. Yes, I sketchbook constantly.
Yeah.
And I don't just use them as sketchbooks. I use them as a repository for bits and pieces I've picked up, some ideas, library tickets, receipts, the whole lot. So yes, sketchbooks are hugely important, and I take things from there and I will sort of build upon them onto canvas or watercolour paper or bits of board I found. I'm working on some old chocolate boxes at the moment.
Oh, right.
Some old Hotel Chocolat wreaths that they have. I'm putting cyanotypes onto those to make Christmas wreaths.
Ah, beautiful. The chocolate boxes, then you just sort of struck a chord with me on that one, because my grandfather owned a confectioner's shop. And one of the most beautiful things I remember playing with these boxes of, I know this probably wouldn't have been allowed now, but there were tobacco boxes in particular which smelt just gorgeous, I've got to say.
Oh, gosh, yes.
I am not a smoker, never have been, but the tobacco boxes, there was something very special and magical about them. But those boxes, the fries boxes that used to turn up with,
yes.
I mean, it sounds like something out of a Dickensian novel, but that they were beautiful works of art in themselves.
They absolutely are. And people like Hotel Chocolat and Fortnum and Mason do some beautiful packaging. My husband, every time he goes to London, he goes to Fortnum and Mason and brings me back a bar of chocolate, which is from their library edition. And I've turned them into tiny little, I've basically split them up and turned them into tiny, tiny little books. And so I love reusing these things because they're astonishing and they are becoming much, much rarer.
Are you known in Inverness and around for the different nature of your work?
Definitely. Yeah. People say, gosh, you're rather eclectic, aren't you? And people who do art professionally, so you don't really have a style, do you? Sometimes they can get a little bit sort of not condescending, but sort of like questioning my professionalism, maybe, because I don't have a particular style. I'm very eclectic and I tend to go with what I enjoy at that moment.
In photography in particular, when you mention style, that is something that's so often used, isn't it? You must find a style. Find a style that's yours. Own that style, which doesn't give you a lot of room left and right, does it?
No, it doesn't. I think as human beings, we change every minute. We're constantly changing. We're constantly experiencing new things. And we need to explore that. You only have to look at people like Picasso, even Van Gogh. They never really had a style throughout their lives. They changed. Mondrian was a tremendous figurative painter and became an enormously successful abstract painter. So yes, people do change and styles change. Mine just happens to sort of swither between them all at once, so rather than moving forward in a very logical way.
I always very much admired Henri Cartier-Bresson's story of going from being a very celebrated photographer and just changing and becoming something else entirely with art later on.
I think that's the crux of creativity. I think if you can explore a style or a discipline that becomes very, very tight and brilliantly constructed, does that make you creative? Or does it make you just very adept?
This fascinated me because it was a side of your work I wasn't quite expecting to learn about, and I don't know why. I think maybe there's a part of me that thinks, oh, I'm an artiste, I can't possibly be commercial as well. You write commercially for a wide range of clients.
Yes.
I know that there's a very commercial edge to your work, and then there's you with your artistic approach. And I wonder how you switch between the two voices. Your artistic voice that's flowing and lovely and just turning left and right whenever it wants to, and this very commercial, more measured pace that you have to take with clients.
I don't. I keep my lovely flowing voice.
Oh, do you? Right.
Yes, even when writing sort of proposals, I've just written a load of proposals this week, but I still like to keep them, with that human touch. Yeah. One thing I can't stand is sort of corporate speak. I think it's horrible. Corporations are made of human beings, not machines. I like that you can keep your human voice, and it just softens the edges.
So how does that work with a client who comes to you with one language and you're firing off down a different direction? Unless they're coming to you because they know that's what you do, of course.
They come to me because they know that's how I write, that's how I work. So if they're coming to me with something terribly technical, I can technicalize it, but there's always got an element of me in it. It always has to have that element.
How did that side of the business grow? I'm intrigued by it, because there is the art and there is this.
Yeah, it's basically, I try and keep that contained as much as I can, but it was sort of people using word of mouth. Also, people come to me who want to have their story told. So it's not just about somebody who has a business that they want to promote or content that they want to write. It's people who have their own stories that they want to share, that they think, oh, this is really interesting. And a lot of people have very interesting stories, and they need somebody just to give them the confidence to draw that out of them. So in a lot of respects, they're doing the writing, they're telling the story. All I'm doing is giving them the tools and showing them a way to make that happen.
And Gael Hillyard returns shortly. There's some examples of her work on the show page. Actually, the show page is always full of links and films and pictures from our guests and pictures that have been sent alongside the letters that we read out. So it's worth visiting each week. Make yourself a cup of coffee, a couple of Garibaldis. That's right, you know the style. And I know, I'm just telling them. I haven't forgotten. Oh dear, he is telling me off. Have you got a stick? That's a good stick. That definitely is a stick of the day. Cue the jingle we've never been able to afford. So Gael is back shortly, and she'll talk about spending time very much alone on Fair Isle, which is Scotland's most remote inhabited island. And to be frank, or fair, I suppose, what she says to me sounds idyllic. I think one year I'd like to take a workshop there. Although I think we'd grow the population by a considerable percentage. Right, mailbag. Have you got your stick, pups? You happy with that while I read another letter? Good. This one is another long overdue one, actually, to read, that is. It's from Hegaard the Dane, who no doubt does not want to talk about Scotland. Unless, of course, you don't follow football in the of the round ball variety. Lars, because you might be saying, who, what, where, when, what are you talking about? What happened? What's important? I can't remember anything. Like most Danes, says Lars, Hegaard the Dane, I believe I'm drawn to mountains. I attribute this to the fact that our highest point, at least in the southern part of the kingdom, reaches just 170.86 metres above sea level. We have a word for that feeling in Danish, Scandinavian. Here we go. I'm going to have to do a word. Bjørgetagen. Bjørgetagen. I love your language because you can be a bit musical with it, much like Italian. Bjørgetagen. Bjørgetagen. I think that would be it. That's my closest one. Would you say, Lars? According to Google, the word originally refers to old Scandinavian folklore in which people were lured into mountains by mythical beings like Hulda and trolls or mountain spirits, and then disappeared, bewitched, enchanted or captivated beyond return. A fixed part of our family's summer holidays is joining the queue of fellow countrymen with the same desire, all heading south toward the Alps, to be captured or overwhelmed. I'm also drawn to refuges, or perhaps more accurately, retreats. Well, I have one for you next year. Yeah, you tell him. Whether they're nestled in the mountains, says Lars, or along the Danish western coast, doesn't really matter to me. From time to time, I just have a yearning, really, to be alone. There's a theme of today's show, you see here, Lars. I don't just throw these things together. Sometimes the yearning is so intense that I wish I could be sent to prison just for a teeny tiny crime. One that hasn't harmed anybody, obviously, but simply just to be alone. I dream of spending time at a refuge surrounded by nature, with a book, an offline computer and a camera, just disappearing for a week. Unfortunately, all the mountain refuges I pass in July, August are surrounded by hordes of tourists like myself, and I'm not allowed to disappear without my wife. So far, our compromise is to stay at a ski hotel lower down the mountain. Anyway, I've got a black and white picture from Hegaard the Dane that he sent in, which will be on the show page today. Lars, my friend, really, this picture, superb. And your letter, only you can turn a gentle love of mountains into a brief fantasy about committing a light victimless crime. I do admire your honesty, I have to say. Most people would probably just say, well, I need a bit of space. But the word Bjørgetagen, one of those will be right, is perfect. That feeling of being, I don't know, taken by the mountains. That place where Wi-Fi doesn't reach us. Oh, the picture you've sent, though, is gorgeous. It really is. If you'd been in Scotland with us, I'd have, or if you are in Scotland with us, this coming June 2026, I'm going to drag you by the collar straight into the photogravure room and make you print that picture. The bird in the top corner, just perfect. This picture is practically begging to be immortalised in ink. And I truly, truly mean that. Fantastic picture. Go see it on the show page today. Thank you, Lars, as always, for your letters. I'm going to level with you. I'm not proud of this, but I didn't change my battery from last week, so I've got it in my pocket at the moment, trying to get it warm enough just to at least make one frame toward the end of the show. Neil, did you not bring spare batteries? You put it on the checklist. I know. Not my brightest move, particularly since I want to make some pictures. It is, after all, a photo walk. Use your phone, Neil. I would, but I'm using the phone to record my words. Hey, what can I do? Anyway, yes, Gael is back in a moment. Almost last call of the gate for our assignment this month. I'm looking, or rather my guest, Liza Gershman, is looking for a picture that says...
Grounded.
Grounded.
I like the idea of grounded as what we do to center ourselves and to create the best art that we can. Mm-hmm. So when I was a professor, I encouraged my students at the start of class every day, we did a meditation. Yes, I'm a California hippie. And so grounded, and then my connection to food, which would be grounded the earth, the land, actual grounding, the farmers that I'll be photographing very soon. Grounded is definitely what travel helps me feel, even though some people say it's an escape. I never feel more connected than when I'm traveling. So that's how I ground myself into humanity, is to travel and to look through a lens. So I think it's many, many different ways, but grounded, that's my word.
So good luck. Just 2 more shows to join in with the assignment for this month, and then we don't have one next month. I'll tell you why. Because we're going to concentrate on the one. That really, in some respects, will be next month's assignment. I am looking for your one picture from 2025 that photographically says, I turned up, I did. The picture you love, not necessarily the pitch perfect one, the one that speaks to you about the year through smiles or tears, perhaps some amazing scenery, somewhere you went, someone you saw, something very complex, something very simple. The closing date is the 12th of December, and if you'd like to take part, send your picture to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show, and this bit's important. It has to be a picture, I know this seems obvious, but I'll say it anyway, that was made in 2025. Just one picture, please. That's why it's called The One, with a few words, if you like, about its meaning. 2,500 pixels wide if you can manage, though I will do the heavy lifting if not. You're welcome to include a link to your social profile or website if you'd like, but it has to be the full URL if it's an Insta link, etc. No borders, no watermarks, blah, blah, blah. All the rules, if you like, are on the page for the one and for the assignment each month. So you know how to send your pictures in. And good luck. I'm looking forward to seeing what you've made. And I will invite 10 of you onto the first show of 2026 to talk about your big picture from 2025. Oh, and while I remember, yes, do go to the pages, the assignment page for each month on photowalk.show, and there is a page for The One as well, so you can see how everybody's pictures are coming along. Have you got a stick, pups? It's another stick of the day. Go on, you take that one. Right, part 2 of my conversation now with Gael Hillyard. And Lars, I think this next part of the interview, and then also something we discuss in part 3 about the silent retreat, I think this could have been practically matched, really, to your letter. Here's Gael Hillyard, part 2.
Now, photography does feature in all these artistic outlets that are part of your makeup. I don't know how large it is within your day to day, but I have seen your photographs, and it is another way to express, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, a lot of my I do a lot of film. Well, I use my iPhone a lot, and I use it for astro work. I'm a great believer in using the tools you've got to hand and keeping it simple. But I use a lot of alternative process, such as caffeinol, which is making photographs with caffeine.
I love that.
I love that. It's great. I'm quite good at that. And cyanotypes. I love playing with cyanotypes. I just think working with that light shadow is just glorious and immediate and fun and pretty.
Well, I'm very jealous because you're in a building that we know very well now, because we've used the Inverness Darkroom for a good few years now for part of our workshop, our Scottish workshop. And so you're part of this amazing collective. It used to be a school, didn't it? I think it used to be a school.
It was a school. It was the original Inverness High School. My office is the headmaster's, the old rector's study.
Oh, is it?
Yes, from the original. So
know.
people are terrified to come in here. If they get elderly chaps walk past and say, I'm not going in there. I had the cane in there several times.
Word. But you do have the two spaces, don't you? You've got your what I'm calling your very organised space.
Yes.
And then I didn't actually get a chance to look in it, but I've seen pictures. A slightly more chaotic room, perhaps, the other one, or is that unfair?
It's probably, I'd actually just got back from, I think I'd been away when I met you. And yes, that room was a little chaotic. My office is 16 foot high ceilings. I'm sitting where the old fireplace was. It's got a beautiful sort of, what is it, a 6/6 sort of Victorian window with arches on it. It's really beautiful, and it's a very big space for thinking. It's got pure white walls and white furniture.
Because there is not
a white carpet.
Not one picture on the wall is what I noted.
Not a one picture at all. My studio, however, is about the size of my kitchen table. It's the smallest studio in the whole Wasps estate across Scotland. And it has been lined with wooden furniture that's painted in navy blue chalk paint with white walls. And it's just basically somewhere to work and hang paintings. And it's just beautiful. And it's slightly chaotic because there's a lot of stuff in there, because I work in a lot of media.
I also wonder whether it was a nod back to those very early days of having a space where there were no rules.
Yes, absolutely. I create my own rules here as well. I'm sure I'm going to get into trouble for it one day too. I take over places.
Well, you've got the headmaster's study, so you're not going to get in any trouble. I like that thinker is within your remit. I like the idea of being a professional thinker. And you very much are, aren't you?
Gosh, yes. I think probably far too much. And I try not to overthink, but I do think a lot. And I think with my fingers. So if I tend to sort of, if I have a thought, it goes straight onto a little notepad, either a note or a Google Doc. Everything gets written there. And if I like what I read and I can fiddle with it, it then gets written by hand, by fountain pen, into my journal.
Is the fountain pen an important part of it?
I have a huge collection of fountain pens.
Ah, right. Yeah, because for a lot of people, the fountain pen is an extension of them. And in particular, I have my late father's fountain pen. And when we talk about things you'd rush into a room if it was on fire to rescue, that would most certainly be one.
Yes, they are incredible, and they are almost alive. I have a collection of 11 they're not very expensive ones, they're quite cheap fountain pens, 11 identical fountain pens, and every single one of them makes my handwriting different.
So they're all the same, but...
They're all the same, but my handwriting is different for each one because the nibs are so finely tuned. And the weight of the ink can balance your hand in a particular way. And I use various inks. Some have metal, sort of glittery stuff in them. Some are just ordinary. Some have iron in them, which I don't tend to put in fountain pens.
Iron?
Yes, iron gall.
How does that change the flow of the ink?
Well, it makes it a lot heavier. There's a lot more drag, and it smells wonderful, and it dries differently, and it gives a certain density to the ink. Every ink that you use has a certain density, a lot more flow. Every ink is different. Every fountain pen is different.
My father used to. Do you remember the bottles of Quink?
Yes.
So he had a dark blue Quink and it was always the same colour, and I was never allowed to use the pen. I was never allowed to use it because, of course, he said, if you use it, it will change the way that I write. Absolutely
will. It totally will. You never, ever, ever let somebody... No. But Quink is just magical. Yeah. It's just one of those things that no matter what you do, if you say Quink, you can see it, you can smell it, you can feel this bottle of ink. Yeah. It is such the most iconic ink ever.
Well, he passed away 30 years ago, and that Quink bottle has long gone dry. But I keep the bottle because that's very much a part of him, and I use different inks these days. And having that pen, I didn't use it at first, to be honest, Gail. It was I felt this sort of pressure of thou shalt not use my pen, It took me a few years before I felt brave enough to use his pen, and it sort of became. It's almost like a wand, I suppose, or a Harry Potter-esque kind of. You're taking over somebody else's wand. We might be going down a strange road here. Many artists wrestle with the balance of solitude and community, which brings me to the time you like to retreat and spend alone being an artist. And I saw some work in Inverness this year where you travelled to Fair Isle for a winter residency. I stood in front of that work and thought, that is what I would like to do, because it was absolute solitude. I mean, it's not the easiest place to be. There's 60 residents, not many places. You are on your own, and electricity sometimes
can be flaky.
Can be flaky.
Yes.
So tell me about this. Why you went? It was a residency, and you took it up.
I love the shipping forecast. One of the reasons we came to the Highlands is because of the shipping forecast. I grew up with it, on the radio. Every morning I would listen to it, even from like tiny 4, 5, 6. I just love the sound of it because we were on the Wirral. We could hear the light ships, in the fog warnings, and the sound of the Irish Sea. Wow. So I grew up with that, and so I wanted to go to Cromarty. So we did. And the other end of Cromarty, at the other side of the shipping forecast, is Fair Isle. And I thought, I'd love to go there.
So I didn't know. You told me that it starts at Cromarty and ends at Fair Isle. Or is it the other way around?
It starts at Cromarty and ends at Fair Isle. I'm sure that some of your listeners might actually correct me on that. But as far as I recall, it starts at Cromarty and ends at Fair Isle. But I wanted to go there. And I wanted a place that was just me, and it was just so perfect for that. I wanted somewhere that was offshore, and I wanted somewhere dark. Dark had to be a major factor of that. The darkness was very important to me, and it had to be wild. My name is Gael, and my husband always teases me about this. I was born in a storm, and it's part of my nature. And Fair Isle is one of the stormiest, windiest places in the UK. And I thought, that's just ideal. So I found a place that was actually offering residencies, which is Fair Isle Studios, and they had a little cottage, which I had all to myself for 2 months. And it was wild. It was 80-mile-an-hour winds. The electricity generator, one of them broke halfway through. So we couldn't use kettles or hair dryers or toasters or anything like that. You had to be really careful with lighting. And it was wild, and it was windy, and it snowed, and you got stuck, and it was just the most incredible experience, and everything I went there for. Apart
from the toaster, by the way, everything sounds perfect. In a storm, toast with Marmite and on butter would be perfect. But I'm interested, though, in this being on your own, and whether it brought a particular kind of presence to your artistry that you can't otherwise find when you're in places like Inverness.
It did, because it gave me a freedom that one isn't able to sort of take advantage of when you've got a family. I've got my husband and my daughter, she's a teenager, and if I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go wandering off, down to the beach, which we don't have near, or down to the woods, I think they get a little concerned. But I can do that there. And then nobody's going to sort of bat an eyelid, because I want to go and sort of look at what the sea looks like at 3 o'clock in the morning. I can do it there. I can't do it here without sort of people going, what's she up to? So it gives you a certain element of freedom. It also gives you the space to stop. And it also connects you very much with the elements, with the wind, with the light, or the absence of light. It connects you with sound, and it connects you just with that sense of space, but also that sense of land as well. And you don't often get the time just to stop and just consider that.
Were you recording the sound as well? I know that would have fascinated me, that whistling with those 80-mile-an-hour winds. Heavens.
I did, yes. I just sort of I wasn't recording, I was just recording it just for phone video, but mostly the sort of sound, the wind banging into the side of the building. I tried to get some of it whistling down the chimney, but I wasn't able to get that. But the sound of the sea, the sound of birds, the sound of just that sheer wall of air moving into you as it bashed, like basically crashed into your clothes. That sort of rustle against your coat. That's what I was trying to catch.
And were you able to be totally alone? Were you able to spend absolute days where you didn't see people? Or
Yes, I was. There were times when I was thinking people would turn up with the most wonderful people, just cup of tea. They'd turn up with boxes of coffee, beetroots that they'd picked from their garden, pieces of cake, just lovely, lovely things. But there were days when I just didn't see or speak to anybody, which was wonderful.
Did you go out with an idea of the kind of art that you were going to produce, or was it very much reactionary to the elements?
It was definitely reactionary. Yeah. I think, again, that's part of the freedom of not having a style. Yeah. You're not enslaved to that. You just do what you want. So some days I drew, some days I painted, some days I just went outside onto the grass and I picked up a couple of bottles of ink and just put like an imperial size sheet of watercolor paper on the ground. Fortunately, it's like the big heavy 600 gram stuff, and then just basically let the wind do the work with the ink. And that was wonderful. And I've got 8 pieces that I created from that at the small sort of little sketches that I finished.
I would imagine, notwithstanding of course your daughter and your husband, but there must have been a part of you that didn't want to come back.
Oh, I didn't want to come back. No, I really did not want to come back. And I think they wanted me to stay out there too, to be honest. We spoke constantly. There were times when we didn't, there were a few days when we didn't speak, but we spoke constantly. Christmas Day, I was there for Christmas Day and New Year, was absolutely magical because everybody was, on the phones, on camera. I didn't get any presents. I didn't want any presents. I didn't really do Christmas out there. But it was lovely just to see their Christmas and see what they were up to and know that I had no part in the washing up or the tidying up. They could just get on and do it, And it really was a magical day.
Did you see any of the Islanders that day?
No. I refused to. It was my day. Yeah. I was supposed to go to chapel. I was supposed to go to chapel, but I didn't. I'd actually hurt my knee. I'd been hit in the knee with the cold bucket. So I was quite injured actually on Christmas Day. So I wasn't feeling so great. So I didn't go to chapel.
And Gael Hillyard returns for the final part of our chat in a moment. If you would like to send a letter into the show, then it's easy to do. Send to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. Where you're walking, where you've been, any stories about your adventures that you've had with a camera. And don't be thinking, it has to be one of those big, expensive professional cameras. No, every camera counts. Your iPhone stories are just as welcome, equally as welcome. This week, your letters are really playing into the theme of the interview in many respects, and also what's going on in my world. Now, do you remember the story about Sycamore Gap? If you're British, I think inevitably yes, it was plastered all across the news. But otherwise, as all crime stories start, in the early hours of 28th of September 2023, the beloved famous Sycamore Gap tree beside Hadrian's Wall, which has appeared, by the way, in all sorts of films. The Robin Hood film, yes, it was in that, was deliberately felled in an act of vandalism that shocked people across the UK. 2 men, Daniel Graham, 39, and Adam Carruthers, 32, are we counting in years or brain cells? Did that come out loud? Were later tried at Newcastle Crown Court, found guilty of criminal damage, and on 15th of July this year, they were each given prison sentences of 4 years and 3 months. So that's the story, and we talked about it on the episode where I walked in the beautiful Savernake Forest with my good friend, and yours too, I think, Mally Davis. He was less than complimentary about those who commit these kinds of crimes, I seem to remember, though he was equally as angry that whilst we felt sad about this one magnificent, majestic big tree, we don't necessarily attach the same importance to large areas of woodland that are being felled almost every single day. So this letter came in following that show, and there is relevance to today's date, which I'll come to in a moment. It's from our friend John Kenny. Hi, Neil. Just listening to the episode called Treedom, which I will link to on the show page. Wonderful to hear the camaraderie and banter between Mally and yourself as usual. I do like spending time with, love spending time with Mally, particularly recording shows. It's always great fun to walk with a good friend. It jogged my memory to something I read when studying with the OU, that's Open University. I told you it's cold. How do you say it, pups? There's a phenomenon. That's the one. I won't be saying the word again. Called the identifiable victim effect, which perhaps applies in the case of the Sycamore Gap tree, as it does in the sad case of human tragedies. The loss of that one famous identifiable tree that we perhaps attach memories or character to means more than a forest of unknown trees being felled, even though the scale of loss of the unknown trees is greater, of course. Essentially, and rather clinically explained, it means that people are able to relate to single identifiable victims rather than larger abstract numbers of casualties, which very often become horrible statistics. Please feel free, says John, to file this under useless information. It's never really come in handy in terms of my work, but I'm passing it on to you. So, John, thank you for this. It makes perfect sense, and it's certainly not useless information file material. And I want to mention it because there's a lovely moment happening at Greenham Common this weekend, which is where we often walk with a show, isn't it? We record so many shows up on the old USAF air base. Greenham Common, which has been claimed back by nature and now returned to us so that we can walk it. And of course we recorded the 500th episode there this year as well. Now, a young sapling grown from the Sycamore Gap the tree that is being planted by the old control tower at 2:30 on Saturday. It's one of the trees of hope the National Trust has been raising from the seeds of the original tree, which I think is, it's no small reminder really that something new can come out of a loss that really did upset so many people in the UK. Now, I would be at this immediately. I really would if I could, but I've been booked, sadly, to attend a different function photographically. So I'm, if I were to be honest, a bit gutted, because I'd love to have been at this event, because I would have photographed this and recorded it in audio. But there we go. If you, he says, hint, hint, and I know this is an international show, so it may be tricky. If you live anywhere near Greenham Common and can pop down and do a photo walk photo for us, and perhaps if you feel extra brave, if you could, I don't know, record a few words with somebody who's there on your iPhone, other phone flavours available, you would be, as I say, an absolute star, honestly. It's not every day that you get to see a little piece of the old Sycamore Gap take root, particularly in my part of the world. Anyway, thank you, John, for the letter. Appreciate it. And it's an interesting, here we go. I said I wouldn't say it. Phenomenon. There are words in the cold, John, you just can't say. Hoo. That looks a bit chilly. Whew. I do love in the summer, I love walking along this stretch of water any time of the year. And actually, as it does get colder, properly colder in Kelly Mitchell's sense of the word, although I don't want quite what you get, minus 23 or minus 153, whatever it is you get in Canada land. But sometimes always these locks on icy, snowy days look fantastic for photography. for Photo Walk sketchbook pictures. I think just before I introduce Gael, who is about to talk about retreating to absolute silence, I'd like to continue along the subject of trees just for a second, if you would allow me. Here's one from Bill Frische, a picture of something so long that you'll have to tab down on your screen to see it on the show page. Pups, this way. Come on. Don't you go jumping in there. This is one long vertical picture. I don't care if you've got the new super long Screen-tastic that's in vertical mode, you still will need to tab down. So this is from Bill. I was out, Neil, photographing some trees. I like, by the way, that you are so nonchalant about this when you consider what's about to come up. I was out photographing some trees. This picture shows the largest tree on Earth in terms of volume. With a height of 83.8 metres, that's 275 feet, a diameter of 7.7 metres, that's 25 feet, an estimated bowl volume of 1,487 cubic metres, that's 52,513 cubic feet, and an estimated age of, get this, 2,300, possibly as much as 2,700 years, which is incredible, Bill. Basically, it's been around longer than everything we call ancient, I think. It's incredible history, isn't it, like that? I obviously needed to go and look up some historic facts, just so you have reference. I did some homework. People were using iron tools and probably thinking they were, stand by for the pun, cutting edge. Rome was basically a small town, still arguing about drains, and the first Olympic athletes were running, and they were running naked because, well, I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. I'm just going to make it up because I've never really quite worked out why people thought it was a good idea for athletes to run the 100-yard dash naked. I'm not absolutely convinced it was to see who finished first, but to see who finished in less discomfort, if you get my drift. But Mother Nature, isn't she fantastic? That tree, that picture. I mean, I know there's higher trees, but when you did all the figures, that's why this one is a world record breaker. Sing the song for those that remember that show on British telly in the 80s. So the final part now of my chat with Gael Hillyard. Now, we've much to talk about this part, starting with this very, well, I called it intense retreat initially. I say intense because that's the first word that came to mind when she originally told me about it. But now I think I may have the wrong word altogether. But following Gael, our play-out song this week, which needs to have a real peaceful spirit about it, I think, is a song called Run Alone, which could, if you squint, take it into the territory of silent retreats or distant windswept islands. It's by March the Machine. It's a wonderful song. It's our play-out song, a tune to have some final thoughts about what's been said on the show today. Here's part 3 of my chat with Gael Hillyard.
I remember, Gael, that when we met in Scotland, you had not long returned from a retreat that is one of silence. And that absolutely fascinated me. You seem perfectly positioned to actually go on a retreat that's about silence. But the difference is you are with other people that are also practicing silence. And I'm really intrigued by how that works, and in practice whether you really were silent or whether people would occasionally say, do you want a cup of tea? You know?
It's called Noble Silence, and it's part of Vipassana, which there are a number of retreat centres, 2 retreat centres in the UK and one being developed in Scotland. I went to the one in Hereford, and we practice what's called Noble Silence. It's part of a Buddhist tradition. It's a very old, I'm not a Buddhist, but it is actually part of a Buddhist practice where you are basically internalized completely. So you have no phone, you have no books, you have no instruments to write with. You don't speak to people, you don't look at people, touch people, acknowledge people, interact with people. You don't dance, you don't do yoga, you don't exercise. You basically, you sleep, you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you brush your hair and you go to the meditation hall and you'll sit there for 2 hours. And then you'll come and have breakfast, and then you'll do another 8 hours of meditation after that. So it's 10 hours of meditation a day. And no, you don't interact with people at all.
Why did you go? What was the purpose behind your...
I've always wanted to do that. I've always been fascinated by the idea of doing a retreat like that, a silent retreat. I did some time at Sammy Ling, and they had people there who were in silence, and I found that fascinating. I thought, gosh, how can they do that? But it's very easy. In fact, it's easier to do that than it is to come back into society, I think. I wanted to experience it. To try it. I didn't expect to experience it for 10 days solid, which is actually quite short. I talk a lot. I'm a real chitter-chatterer, and I just wanted to see if I could shut up for a while.
Was there a moment, are you 1 or 2 days or 3 days in when you think, okay, I'm getting it now, I don't feel so anxious? Or were you from the get-go, really, did you feel comfortable in that setup?
No, from the get-go, you're basically thrown in very quickly into the deep end. There's no introduction. It's basically you arrive, you land, you get on with the practice, and you're led through it by a very odd-sounding number of discourses, which are by a chap called Mr. Goenka, which is what Steve Jobs, I think, probably followed as well. You know, lots of these very high-profile people have done Vipassana. You're thrown in at the deep end, and you get to about day 3, and you're thinking, oh my God, this is a cult. And you start to become you feel all the anger and all the paranoia start. You think, I've got to escape. I can't cope with this. And it's there to test you. I'm sure it's there to test you, to push you past where you're comfortable. And in the end, you just go, well, I'm here now. I may as well just accept it. And that's when everything just drops. And that's when you start to think, golly, this is amazing.
How many people, for example, would be in that room, typically?
There are 130. There are 65 men, 65 women.
Wow, right.
Both separated. We don't interact at all.
So
men and women do not interact.
Okay, different rooms. Women, one room.
One meditation hall, but completely segregated down the middle. Okay. But the accommodation is completely isolated.
Yes.
You don't interact.
No.
You don't speak to them. You don't see them at meal times or in the woods, or when you go you get to exercise, you go for a walk. You know, you're encouraged to go for your daily walk. They have a beautiful woodland there. You know, you don't really interact with anybody else. In fact, you don't interact with anybody else.
I am fascinated by people, and I know you are too. So there would be an element of me in this meditation room, in some respects, looking around. I know you're not supposed to look around and look at people, but we're human, and inevitably we tell stories to ourselves about the people that we see, and even the slight hand movements or gestures that they make or the way they move, we interpret that and we form stories. That's human nature. And I wonder whether that was happening with you, and whether you were finding terrible characters where you thought, who are you? What are you?
It was terrible. I am by nature extremely nosy. So I was, and I'm very analytical. So I was like, oh, and I'd hear people, and you recognize people by their footsteps. Wow. You'd recognize people by the shadows, by how that shadow would move across a path. You think, oh, such and such. You don't know their names, but so and so. You give them names. You know, like there's one girl who had to have every cushion, every blanket, and she'd create this sort of like space for herself, this almost like a cocoon. And I named her the girl who has to have everything. And so they all had and then one would walk around with her hands in her pockets, and I'd say, oh, this is Miss Academia. And you start giving these people almost quite spiteful names, really. And I think, stop it. This is not nice. So you had to sort of start taking your ego away from your perceptions. And what really pleased me at the end, Neil, was when you could speak to somebody, I was so delighted that all my perceptions were wrong. That I think, I'm not as perfect as I think I am. I'm not as clever as I think I am. Because every single perception I created in my mind was incorrect.
So was that on the final day when you were allowed then to talk to people. That must be a very intense moment.
It was horrible. It was horrible. We'd had our phones taken off us, and then we were allowed to get them. People were, the first thing they did was grab their phones, and the first thing they did was on their phones. I didn't touch my phone for a whole day. I just thought, I don't need this.
Yeah.
And they were just completely stuck on their phones as soon as they could get hold of them. And they were noisy. And I was like, the noise. And I'd just been in the Devonshire a few days before. My last meal was at the Devonshire in London. And there was like 200 people outside, outside there talking full blast. It was louder.
How is it when you went back to, well, let's call it civvy life, when you eventually arrive back in town and back in a place where people are chatting freely? What does that feel like? Does that must be quite a strange feeling?
I had to meet Neil in London, my husband in London. We were flying back the next day. He'd just been in Somerset, so he'd agreed to meet me in London in Piccadilly.
Not the quietest place in the world.
No. So I walked from Blackfriars to Piccadilly.
Yeah.
It was rainy, admittedly, but everybody just moved out my way. I had this sort of like this presence, like this wave where just people sort of moved out of my way. And I thought, do you know what? I've not been to Piccadilly Circus since I was about 14. Let's go out and look at the fountain, because I know the person who actually did the new Eros, cast the new Eros.
Goodness.
And I thought, let's go and have a look. And as I walked up steps to the fountain, to Eros, everybody just moved out my way. On the tube, people moved out my way. And I was thinking, it's because I had this sort of presence about me, this stillness about me, that people just said, I'm not going to get in that place. I'm just going to move.
How weird. How strange.
It is.
And did it affect your creativity? Are you now creating differently? I know you're planning to go back on another one.
Yes, I am going back on Vipassana. I've got one scheduled. But did it affect my creativity? No, I don't think it did. Because that's how I create anyway.
Yeah. From the blog, I was reading the blog, and one of the latest articles actually, What We Notice Matters, immediately appeals to me. And you were describing doom scrolling shifting your whole inner atmosphere. What made you realise the things we consume don't just pass through us, but they actually stay with us? And I ask that because I've been writing something in a very similar vein about just that sort of thing.
You watch people's reactions. As soon from that blog post, it was a preview, and I'd walked in thinking I'd spent the day looking at all kinds of horrendous stuff. And I walked into this preview, which was about fun, and it was about art, and it was about people gathering to have a glass of wine. And I started talking about politics, and I watched people start to back off. And I think, oh my gosh, I'm bringing this really ghastly tale into a really lovely environment. And it was so apparent, and I just thought, it was so clear what I'd done. And I felt ashamed, actually. It felt really like I'd ruined the tone. And I thought, I can't do that anymore. And I haven't actually looked at the news since Vipassana, which was like over 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And I feel so much better.
So you're not consuming any news now? That's
why I didn't even know the football was on last night.
Right. That was the first thing I said to Gael when we, obviously this would have been earlier during the week, but I said, I bet it's noisy in Inverness today because Scotland won last night, and the first time in 28 years they've automatically qualified for the World Cup. And Gael looked at me like I just said something in ancient Greek.
I haven't looked at it. And I grew up with football. I'm from the Wirral, football, music, arts in our soul,
I want to talk about the workshops that you do. It's part of your business. And I did mention I can never say this word. I knew I'd fall over it. Generative AI. I'm not going to say it again. I'll just call it AI from this moment. Now, some artists, some photographers, many creatives instantly probably come up in hives when that's mentioned.
Yes.
You have not. You've embraced it. And I wonder why.
Because it's there. And it always will be there. And if we don't use it responsibly, it will be used irresponsibly. It will be made to work irresponsibly. So we need to use it responsibly. We need to be the ones that are setting the narrative. AI has been there for over 70 years now. It's not a new thing. It was started in the 1950s. It was around before computers were ever on our desktops.
Oh.
It's always been around.
How? And what form?
Is it Ava Lovelace, I think? Right. It was a woman in the 1950s who started developing what we now call AI, right. How we sort of manipulate and structure data. So it's always been there. It's like Google. It is not going to go away. It's going to happen. We just need to sort of be aware of it and use it responsibly. If we use it responsibly, we do have agency. If we just say, oh, it's not there, and we just let people make stupid videos about silly things, then it starts to use us rather than we using it. And it is a good tool. I use it as a sort of pencil sharpener. So I write phonetically. I type and write so fast that I actually write phonetically. So I'll type something in, but it will just be gobbledygook, and then I will just run it through something like Gemini, which is very strict, by the way. It's not flourishing or anything like that. I'll run it through Gemini, and it will basically tidy up my spelling and maybe a little bit of punctuation, but the work's mine. It's always mine.
When you say no flourishes, do you mean like ChatGPT will often try and assume the place of a poet?
Yes, Gemini is quite good because it's sort of very pragmatic and it's very business-like, and that's the one I would tend to sort of use. It's very great for me, who works on lots and lots of different things, to marry up dots. And create connections.
And how does that work with your art then, and creating our art pieces?
I don't tend to use it for that at all. Right. My daughter would disown me if I did. She hates AI. She's 19. Her and her friends hate AI with a passion. They absolutely will not touch it at all. They don't realize that she's using it every time she goes onto social media, but she really doesn't like it. I don't use it in my art at all, but I have created AI images to sort of see how far I could push them. I think you might have seen a couple of them in my office of landscapes, or sort of new urban landscapes, which I tried to do to see if I could depict sort of schooling or housing or wind turbines, how they would fit together, how that would sort of interpret new urban environments. And to be honest, it's pretty rubbish.
The other workshops I saw you, there's many there about the history of, more about the history of art. There's one, The Genius of Da Vinci, which
yes,
I think I would have been fascinated to come on that one. He's clearly been an influence in your life. I would assume that you would be doing workshops about him.
He was probably very much more of an influence on my relatives' reaction to how I learn art than my life, because they were, you do it like Da Vinci does. He never used tools. He never used lines. He never moved things, which is absolute nonsense, because he absolutely did. He was tremendously good at using tools. He was very innovative. And I think when I say work like Da Vinci, it is that innovation. You shouldn't do it, but do use essential oils as a thinner. You shouldn't do it because it destroys your paint. I won't use it because I sell commercially, but if you're working at home and you want to explore oil paint, well, you can get a cheap bottle of tea tree and use that rather than white spirit. You're not selling it. If it degrades after a few years, then that's fine.
I suppose to come back to your photographic principle of using coffee to not necessarily using all those other processing.
No, exactly.
Tools.
It's if you just try different things, try making your own pigment, try using seashells, try using essential oils. You can always scan it in and keep it that way. So it's sort of looking at different ideas, looking at different ways of thinking. Write everything down. Da Vinci, like me, was a tremendously great, lover of writing everything down. He wrote everything down. If you want to see something, write about it. Don't journal it. Just let it flow. it's not a journal. It's just a subconscious stream, if you like, a stream of unconscious thinking.
We talked a little bit earlier about working on the chocolate boxes from Hotel Chocolat. Are there any other? I wouldn't imagine you just have one project at a time. I would have thought. I thought
No.
a mind like Gail's would probably have many things percolating concurrently.
Yes, I do. I mean, actually, I blend my own ink. I use vintage inks. I use very rare inks. So I've blended a whole series of 12 inks at the moment, which I've called Aurora Cantata, which are all related to songs about stars. So I've got one that's called Orion, which is related to David Bowie's Starman. And I just basically created a whole list, and I'm selling little bottles of inks to set the narrative about dark skies. Dark skies is my thing. I just want people to sort of think, oh, look, there's the stars. So everything at the moment is about stars. I'm writing bits about stars, but I've created some Christmas cards, which are constellations. So it might be a constellation in the shape of some mistletoe, or the shape of a present. So I've got all this little sort of celestial, almost like horoscope, this zodiac of Christmas constellations, which are going to be Christmas cards on cyanotype backgrounds.
Fantastic. I've only just joined your mailing list. I will put the address for people to do that, because I'm looking forward to seeing the eclectic nature of what you'll be telling us about as you're working. We have a question at the end of our interviews, and I think you're going to be fascinating to answer this one. What's your why?
Because. That's it. Just because I can.
They see nothing in your eyes. Go, tell them all your lies. Take it all, don't bring it back. Take it all, don't bring me back.
March the Machine with a song called Run Alone. Fantastic song to end to today's show. And my thanks to Gael Hillyard for being my guest today, and the wonderful letters that we've had in from you today. Pictures on the show page, as always. Do make sure you go to photowalk.show. And that's it for today. If you can't wait until next Friday and would like to walk a little further together, then that's what the Extra Mile is all about. We're up to number 165. I can't wait for the week we do 180. You go the extra mile for me, so I go the extra mile for you and record an additional show. It's part of our Patreon channel where you can help support the show. Gael Hillyard is back actually for a further chat in 3 more stops.
On this week's Extra Mile.
Are you hard on yourself then when you see these mistakes?
I'm vicious.
Are you?
I'm absolutely vicious. If I don't like something, I'll rip it up. I'll cut it up.
We did say you paint across work.
And I paint crosswork all the time.
So if you'd like to hear more of my conversation, my extra conversation with Gael, head to the website and click Extra Mile or the orange Support the Show button if you're not already an Extra Miler. Because if you are, well, you help us keep walking week after week. And my sincere thanks to you for supporting the show. A few mentions for those who smooth the voyage for me. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT. There is a link for him at the foot of the website or the web page, each show page now, in case you have problems that you need Neil to help you with. My thanks also to Andrea Gilpin, who keeps a watchful eye over Instagram, as does Kelly Mitchell for Facebook, to Kelvin Brown, who's at the helm of the Flickr group, and to Michael Brennan, who compiles the music of the show onto a Spotify playlist. Write a postscript for the show. Today, I'm taking one from Susan Sontag. I think this one leans, as they say, nicely into photography, without it being only about photography, if that makes any sense, or maybe the cold has finally got to me. But it plays perfectly into today's conversation, that's for sure. Susan Sontag was an American writer and cultural critic known for her sharp, fearless thinking, particularly on photography and art, and the way she looked at the world, although I think this is perfectly softened. She said, "Silence remains inescapably a form of speech."
What's there to hold in the light of this moon? My mind keeps searching, but my heart decides thoughts can be cruel. They're not mine to hold. The space unravels when you let go.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.